The invitation was waiting on my kitchen counter when I got home from Fort Meade. Thick cream cardstock, gold trim. My father never did anything halfway. The front read, Coal Development Group Holiday Gala, black tie, formal reception, 40 confirmed guests. I already knew what it was. My dad had been talking about this deal for months. Mixed-use redevelopment project outside Annapolis. Retail office space, high-end condos. 90+ million total valuation once stabilized. He called it the project that would put the firm on the map. The firm had been on the map for 25 years, but that's how he talked. I opened the envelope at the kitchen island, still in uniform. The printed message was polite, standard language. Date, time, location, dress code. Then at the bottom below the RSVP line, a handwritten note. Savannah, given the optics this year, it may be better if you sit this one out. No signature, but it didn't need one. I stood there for a minute reading it twice, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something less ridiculous. Given the optics, I had spent the day reviewing a cyber threat briefing tied to municipal infrastructure vulnerabilities across 3 states. My team was analyzing ransomware patterns hitting water treatment systems. Optics were not the problem. My phone buzzed before I even put the card down. Victoria. Of course, I answered. Hey, she said upbeat in that tight way she uses when she's managing a situation. You got the invite? I did. So just to be clear, you're not coming, right? Straight to it. No small talk. I saw the note. Good. I just didn't want it to be awkward. This is a big night, Sav. We've got Redstone Equity, 2 private lenders, and a city council rep in the room. It's serious capital. Serious capital. As if I had never seen a balance sheet in my life. I understand, I said. It's just... She paused. Uniform doesn't really fit the tone. And honestly, investors Google everyone these days. Army cyber stuff can raise questions. We need clean optics. Clean optics. I leaned against the counter and looked down at the gold trim on the invitation. You're worried I'll embarrass Dad. No one said that. You didn't have to. She exhaled, impatient. You know what I mean. This is business, not whatever it is you do. Whatever it is I do. For 16 years I had been in the Army. I graduated from West Point. I deployed. I built cyber protection teams from scratch. I currently oversaw a unit responsible for defending critical infrastructure systems. But sure, whatever it is I do. I won't be there, I said. There was relief in her voice. Good. Thank you. Really. This just isn't your world. We hung up. I put the invitation back in the envelope and set it on the counter. Then I walked to the bedroom, changed out of uniform, and hung it carefully in the closet. Habit. Discipline doesn't shut off because someone questions your value. The truth is, this wasn't new. Victoria had been managing optics her entire life. When we were kids, I was the one who brought home straight A's. She was the one who brought home polished stories about group projects and student government. If I got recognition for academics, she found a way to shine socially. She learned early that being impressive wasn't about being right. It was about being seen. At 14, she told a cousin that I studied so much because I didn't have real instincts. At 18, when I accepted my appointment to West Point, she said I chose the Army because I couldn't handle competitive business programs. Corporate world eats people alive, she said back then. You're too rigid for it. She told that story enough times that eventually my father started repeating it. When I commissioned, Victoria cried. Not because she was proud, because she thought I was making a mistake. She told everyone at the party that I was brave, but in private, she said I was running away from real competition. She stayed home, interned at Dad's firm, built her resume inside the safety of an office with her last name on the door. By the time I made captain, she was director of finance. By the time I made major, she was CFO. And every holiday dinner somehow turned into a performance review of my life. How long are you staying in? Are you thinking about something stable? Do you ever miss real money? I never corrected them. That part was deliberate. Because while I was building my career in the Army, I was also building something else. 3 years ago, I founded a cybersecurity company focused on infrastructure resilience for mid-sized cities. It started small. 5 people, then 12, then 30. We hired a CEO to run operations. I stayed majority owner and strategic oversight. Everything disclosed properly through ethics channels. Cleared through JAG. Filed OG 450. No conflict with my duties. Revenue last year, just over 42 million. Victoria thinks I consult. My father thinks I have a side hustle. I've never corrected them, not because I was hiding, because I was watching to see if anyone in my family would ever ask what I actually do. They never did. 2 days after the invitation arrived, Victoria sent another message. Please don't post anything in uniform that night. Investors monitor social feeds. I read it twice. No greeting. No softness. Just management. I typed back, understood. That night I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, reviewing a capital structure summary for Redstone Equity Partners. Redstone was the anchor investor in my father's redevelopment project. 47 million committed capital. Without it, the financing stack didn't hold. 6 months earlier, through a holding structure reviewed by counsel and disclosed appropriately, I had acquired a controlling interest in Redstone. Legally, cleanly, quietly. Not to sabotage, at least not at first. The original thought was simpler than that. If my capital helped fund the biggest deal of my father's career, maybe the narrative would change. Maybe I would stop being the daughter who chose the army because she couldn't compete. Maybe respect would show up on its own. The Gala invitation answered that, given the optics. I closed the laptop and stared at the screen for a second. Not angry, not emotional, just clear. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan Walsh, my CFO. We finalized the updated ownership filing, he said. Redstone's structure is clean. Good. You still planning to attend your dad's event? No, I said. I'm not. There was a brief pause on the line. Ethan knows my tone by now. Do you want to discuss anything before the gala, he asked. Yes, I said. Review the withdrawal clause in the Redstone agreement. I want to confirm notice timing and execution process. Silence on the other end. Not shock. Just recalibration. You're serious. Completely. He didn't argue. That's one of the reasons I hired him. I'll loop in counsel and confirm mechanics, he said. You want this clean. Always. I ended the call and looked back at the invitation still sitting on the counter. 40 guests. Clean optics. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about whether I belonged in that room. I was thinking about whether they understood who else already did. I left the invitation on the counter overnight and went for a 5-mile run before sunrise. Cold air helps me think. No noise, no commentary, just rhythm and pavement. Victoria has always needed an audience. I never did. That difference started early. When we were kids, our report cards came home on the same day. Mine were predictable. Straight A's. Teachers wrote things like exceptional focus and top of her class. Victoria's were good, but not top. She learned quickly that academic competition was a losing game with me, so she shifted arenas. Student government, dance team, charity events, anything that put her on a stage instead of behind a desk. At dinner, she'd tell long stories about who liked her, who respected her, who asked her advice. I'd say 2 sentences about a math competition and go back to eating. My father laughed at her stories. He nodded at my grades. That nod bothered her more than any applause. By high school, the comparison wasn't subtle. She'd say things like, Sav's smart, but she doesn't have instincts. Or, she memorizes things. I read people. It became a family narrative. She was the social strategist. I was the quiet technician. When I applied to West Point, Victoria was already in business school. She told everyone I chose the Army because I needed structure. She's great with rules she'd explain. Corporate life is more fluid. The implication was clear. I couldn't compete in her world. I didn't argue. West Point didn't feel like hiding. It felt like clarity. Standards were written down. Performance mattered. Results spoke. Victoria came to my commissioning ceremony in a fitted navy dress and heels that probably cost more than my first month of base pay. She hugged me for the photos. Later that night, she pulled me aside. You know this doesn't translate to real business, right? She said. No one in private equity cares how well you shoot. I had just committed to serve at least 5 years of active duty. She was worried about optics. Over the next decade, we built parallel lives. I deployed twice, promoted on schedule, took on cyber assignments as the Army expanded that field. The work wasn't glamorous. It was long hours in secure rooms staring at network architecture diagrams, identifying weak points before someone else did. Victoria stayed home and climbed inside my father's firm. Coal Development Group started as small commercial projects, strip malls, office renovations, then mid-rise mixed-use buildings. She handled budgets, forecasting, lender relationships. She learned how to talk about capital stacks before most people learn how to talk about mortgages. At family holidays, the contrast was almost scripted. She would talk about interest rate spreads and acquisition pipelines. My father would lean in impressed. I would mention training rotations or cyber vulnerability assessments. Someone would change the subject to football. Once during Thanksgiving, I explained how municipalities were underestimating ransomware risk in public utilities. Victoria laughed and said, "You always think the sky is falling." 3 months later, a city 2 states over paid millions to restore its water treatment system after a breach. No one brought that up at Christmas. When I made, Major Victoria threw me a small congratulatory brunch. She posted a photo online with the caption, "Proud of my little sister for finding her path." Finding her path. As if I had wandered into it by accident. By the time I pinned Lieutenant Colonel, she was CFO. The promotion came with more responsibility and more scrutiny. Financial disclosures, ethics reviews, layers of oversight that don't exist in family businesses. I filed everything. Every outside investment, every ownership interest. I've never been careless with compliance. In my world, you don't get second chances if you blur lines. Around that same time, my cybersecurity company began to scale. It started 3 years ago with a simple observation. Mid-sized cities couldn't afford top-tier infrastructure security, but faced the same threats as major metros. We built modular monitoring systems tailored to budget-constrained municipalities. The first contract was modest. A city in Ohio that needed help protecting its public works network. We delivered under budget. Word spread. I hired a CEO with federal contracting experience to run daily operations. I stayed at board level. Strategic oversight. Long-term direction. Everything vetted through Army ethics channels. Victoria never asked how it was going. At dinner one night, she said, "Consulting must be nice. Flexible hours." I didn't correct her. My father once asked if I planned to pivot into something serious before retirement. I told him I was already serious. He laughed like I had made a joke. The jealousy was never loud. It was layered. Victoria doesn't scream. She positions. If I achieved something, she reframed it. When I completed a joint task force rotation early because our team exceeded metrics, she said, "Military promotions are automatic though, right?" They're not. When I mentioned that our company had crossed 8 figures in annual revenue, she said revenue isn't profit. It was profitable. She needed the comparison to tilt in her favor. That's why the gala mattered so much to her. This wasn't just another holiday party. It was the stage where she intended to prove she belonged at the top tier of private development. Redstone Equity. 2 secondary lenders. A city official with zoning influence. She had orchestrated seating charts, curated guest lists, reviewed wine selections, managed optics down to table linens, and then there was me, an Army officer who didn't match the aesthetic. 2 days before the gala, she forwarded me a draft press release about the redevelopment project. At the bottom, in small print, it listed key capital partners. Redstone Equity Partners. I stared at that line for a while. She didn't know that 6 months earlier, when Redstone sought additional capital to expand its portfolio, I stepped in through a holding structure. The fund's managing partners needed stability. I provided it. Ownership shifted quietly. Documents filed, disclosures made. Victoria signed off on Redstone as anchor investor without ever asking who controlled the fund. Because in her mind, I was not a factor. That afternoon, she sent another text. "Just confirming you're staying off social media Saturday. No uniform posts. Investors dig." I read it sitting at my desk at Fort Meade between briefings. My response was simple. Understood. Not defensive, not sarcastic. Understood. I locked my phone and turned back to the classified network in front of me. Threat models don't care about sibling rivalries. They either hold or they don't. That night I opened the Redstone operating agreement again. Not emotionally, procedurally. Withdrawal clauses are rarely dramatic. They're technical, conditional. Redstone's agreement allowed majority stakeholders to adjust capital deployment strategy, with formal notice provided certain timelines were met. Everything had to be clean. I called Ethan. Walk me through notice mechanics, I said. He didn't ask why this time. He went straight to structure. As he explained timing windows and documentation flow, I pictured the ballroom at the country club. Crystal glasses. Tailored suits. Victoria moving from table to table confident. She thought the biggest risk in that room was my uniform. She hadn't considered what else I might be wearing. I closed the Redstone operating agreement and pulled up my Army financial disclosure file instead. If I was going to move capital, everything had to line up on both sides of my life. Gets documented. I filed an OGE 450 every gets documented. I filed an OGE 450 every year. I had sat in a small office with our brigade ethics counselor more than once explaining exactly what I owned and what I did not touch. I don't pursue federal contracts tied to my chain of command. I had told him 3 years ago, when the company crossed into serious revenue. No DoD overlap. Municipal and private infrastructure only. He reviewed it. Signed off, clean. The Army doesn't care if you build something on your own time. It cares if you blur lines. I never have. That double life wasn't glamorous. It was disciplined. Reveille at 0500. PT. Briefings. Classified reviews. Team sync. Then late evenings, encrypted calls with my CEO and CFO about city contracts, vendor negotiations, and risk exposure. I don't run daily operations. That's not possible on active duty. I chair quarterly board meetings. I set long-term direction. I sign off on major capital moves. The rest runs without me. Victoria assumes I dabble. She's never asked how many people we employ. She's never asked about our client base. She once referred to it as your little tech thing. Our little tech thing has 120 employees across 4 states. The first time revenue crossed 8 figures, I was in a SCIF reviewing a vulnerability report for a municipal energy grid. My CEO sent a short message. We did it. Profit margin healthy. No celebration emojis. Just numbers. I replied with one line, keep scaling responsibly. Discipline carries over. 3 months after that milestone, Redstone Equity Partners reached out to our company about cybersecurity risk modeling for mixed-use development sites. Not my father's firm. Another client entirely. That's how I started looking deeper at Redstone's structure. They were a mid-sized regional private equity fund. Solid but stretched. Expanding aggressively into redevelopment projects, they needed stable capital to maintain flexibility. Through counsel, I structured a buy-in using retained earnings from my company and personal capital. Not impulsive, not emotional. Reviewed by attorneys. Disclosed through Army channels. I became majority stakeholder quietly. Redstone's managing partners stayed in place. Day-to-day decisions remained theirs. I didn't interfere. 6 months later, Redstone announced participation as anchor investor in my father's redevelopment deal. I remember sitting at my kitchen table reading that press release. Coal Development Group. Redstone Equity. 47 million committed. I could have disclosed my position right then. I didn't. Part of me wanted to see what would happen if my success supported his publicly. If I strengthened the capital stack behind his biggest project, would the tone change at dinner? Would the jokes about real business stop? Nothing changed. Victoria talked about Redstone like it was a trophy she hunted personally. Top-tier fund, she said over Thanksgiving. They vetted us hard. They vetted her numbers. They never asked who ultimately controlled the fund. My father clapped her on the back. That's my CFO. I sat at the end of the table and passed the rolls. Now, with the Gala days away, I reopened the Redstone Capital Commitment Letter and cross-referenced notice periods. Withdrawal wasn't instantaneous. It required formal documentation and effective dates. If notice was delivered before close of business, capital deployment could be paused pending board review. That pause alone could destabilize a financing structure built on timing. I wasn't looking to break laws or cause chaos. I was looking at leverage. My phone rang mid-afternoon while I was reviewing a briefing packet. Ethan, we've confirmed the mechanics, he said. Majority stakeholder can trigger strategic redeployment of capital with formal notice. Effective end of business day. It forces an immediate review by project lenders. Any penalties, I asked? Reputational. Possibly relationship damage. Legally clean. Good. He paused. This is going to hit your father's deal hard. I'm aware. You want to reconsider timing. No. Silence on the line. Not judgment. Just recognition that this wasn't a casual decision. After we hung up, I pulled up the Gala program Victoria had sent out to select guests. Seating charts, menu, speaker order. My father was scheduled to give remarks at 7:35 p.m. Dessert service typically started around 7:40. 40 guests, 2 Redstone representatives, secondary lenders, a council member who could influence zoning variances. I didn't need to be in that room to affect it. That night I drove to my parents' house to drop off a small holiday gift for my mother. I timed it deliberately so Victoria wouldn't be there. My father answered the door. "You're not coming Saturday?" he asked before I even stepped inside. "No." He nodded once, relieved. "It's complicated this year. Investors are conservative. We don't want distractions." I looked at him carefully. "You think I'm a distraction? I think optics matter." There it was again. He wasn't cruel about it. He genuinely believed it. In his mind, a decorated Army cyber officer was less marketable than a CFO in a tailored suit. "Good luck Saturday," I said. He smiled. Once this closes, we're expanding. Bigger projects, national presence, funded by capital he didn't realize was mine. On the drive back to my apartment, I didn't feel anger. I felt something sharper. Clarity. Respect wasn't going to appear because I quietly strengthened his balance sheet. Victoria didn't want me at the gala because she thought I would lower the room's perception of power. She had no idea where the power in that room actually sat. The next morning at Fort Meade, I met with our brigade commander for a routine sync. We covered operational updates first. Then he glanced at my disclosure file. "Redstone equity acquisition finalized," he asked. "Yes, sir." "No conflict with current mission sets." "None. Municipal and private infrastructure only. Fully disclosed." He nodded. "Stay clean. Your promotion board packet is strong. Don't give them noise." "I won't." That was the final confirmation I needed. I wasn't risking my commission. I wasn't bending rules. I was exercising ownership rights that had been legally acquired. That afternoon, Victoria sent one more message. "Press from the city might be there. Appreciate you keeping a low profile." Low profile. I typed back the same word I'd used before. Understood. Then I forwarded Ethan the finalized notice draft. "Hold for execution," I wrote. I set my phone down and returned to reviewing a network segmentation report for a municipal client. Compartmentalization is a skill you learn early in uniform. Handle what's in front of you. Don't leak emotion into the mission. By the time the sun set, everything was in place. Victoria was focused on seating charts and champagne pairings. Redstone's legal team had pre-approved documentation pathways. My Army file was squared away. The only variable left was timing. I set the phone face down on my desk and opened the Redstone Capital flowchart again. If this moved forward, it had to move forward clean. Redstone's position in my father's deal wasn't decorative. They were the anchor investor. $47 million in committed equity. That commitment gave secondary lenders confidence. It signaled stability. Without it, the financing stack thinned out fast. I wasn't guessing. I'd reviewed enough redevelopment models to know how sensitive they were to anchor capital. Pull that piece and everyone recalculates risk. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, Victoria had bragged about locking in institutional money. She loved that phrase. Institutional money. As if that automatically meant superior judgment. She never once asked who stood behind it. 6 months earlier, when Redstone's managing partners approached my company about advisory work, I saw the cracks. They were expanding aggressively. Too aggressively. They needed reliable capital to stay competitive in regional bids. Through counsel, I structured the acquisition carefully. Personal capital. Retained earnings from my company. No leverage. No borrowed exposure. The holding entity was transparent to regulators and disclosed through Army ethics channels. Nothing about it was secret in the legal sense. It was just not public in the family sense. I didn't buy into Redstone to set a trap. I bought in because it was a smart investment. Mid-cap redevelopment funds in secondary markets were undervalued. Growth potential was strong if managed conservatively. When Redstone later signed on to my father's project, I considered recusing myself from any decisions related to that specific deal. Instead, I did what majority stakeholders do. I stayed hands-off operationally and let fund managers manage. If the project succeeded, my investment would grow. If it failed, that would be on performance, not interference. But the gala changed the frame. 3 days before the event, Victoria called again. No greeting. "We finalized the speaking order," she said. "Dad goes at 7:35. Redstone reps right after. It's tight." Sounds organized. It has to be. This is a statement project. Statement. Everything with her was theater. She hesitated. "You're sure you're not coming?" "I'm sure." "Good." A small laugh. Less complicated. Complicated. The night before the gala, my father posted on LinkedIn about strategic partnerships that elevate communities. He tagged Redstone. He tagged Victoria. He did not tag me. I read the comments. Investors congratulating him. Colleagues praising the scale. Victoria replying to each one with polished enthusiasm. I closed the app and went back to reviewing the withdrawal notice draft. It was straightforward. Formal notice of strategic capital redeployment. Effective end of business day upon delivery. Ownership disclosure attached as required under fund transparency rules. Ethan had tightened the language. Legal reviewed it twice. "This won't look emotional," he'd said earlier. "It'll look procedural." That mattered. Revenge stories usually involve shouting or scandal. This wasn't that. This was structure. The morning of the gala, I woke at 500 and ran intervals. The cold burned in my lungs. It grounded me. Back home, I brewed coffee and opened a secure call with my CEO for our scheduled check-in. "Everything stable?" I asked. "Municipal contract in Ohio is expanding scope," he said. "We'll need to hire 5 more analysts." "Approve it," I said. "Keep margins steady. No drama. Just growth." Before we hung up, he added, "You're quiet today." "I have a family event," I said. He laughed lightly. "Those are usually worse than ransomware." He wasn't wrong. At 1100, I drove to Fort Meade for a short in-person sync with my operations officer. Routine updates, budget projections, nothing connected to Redstone or my father's firm. I keep compartments separate for a reason. At 1400, Ethan sent a final message. "Documentation locked. Counsel on standby. You confirm timing." I responded 7:45 p.m. He called immediately. "Specific reason for that time." "Dessert," I said. A pause. "Full attendance," he replied. "Yes." He didn't argue. He understood the mechanics of rooms. Public events follow predictable rhythms. Speeches, applause, plates cleared, people relaxed. Then disruption lands heavier. By late afternoon, Victoria's social media was already active. Photos of table settings, floral arrangements, caption "Big night for coal development." I stared at one image longer than I expected. 40 chairs. Perfect symmetry. Place cards aligned. There was no place card with my name. At 17:30, my mother texted, "We'll miss you tonight." That one landed differently. I typed back, "Have a good evening." No explanation. No correction. At 18:30, I changed into jeans and a dark sweater. No uniform. No ceremony. I poured a glass of water and set my phone on the kitchen table. Across town, I knew the country club ballroom would be filling. Victoria greeting investors at the door. My father shaking hands, firmly projecting confidence. Redstone's 2 representatives would be present. They'd reviewed their talking points with my father earlier that week. They had no idea their controlling stakeholder planned to alter capital allocation strategy. I didn't resent them. They were doing their jobs. At 7:10, Ethan sent a short message, "Standing by." I imagined the room. My father's voice carrying slightly too loud. Victoria moving between tables, laughing at the right moments. At 7:28, another message from Ethan. "Counsel ready. Notice queued." I checked the time. At 7:35, my father would begin speaking. He would thank investors, thank his CFO, thank Redstone for believing in the project. He would talk about expansion, growth, community impact. He would not mention the daughter he asked to stay home for the sake of optics. I picked up my phone and scrolled briefly through Victoria's latest post. "Ready to make history tonight." History. At 7:41, Ethan sent one more message. "Confirm, execute" at 7:45. I set the phone down, walked to the window and looked out over the dark line of trees beyond the parking lot. No anger, no rush, just a clean decision. At 7:44, I returned to the table and picked up the phone. "Execute at 7:45, I typed. The message showed delivered immediately. Across town, crystal glasses were likely being cleared. In a ballroom arranged for perfect optics, timing was about to matter more than seating charts. The phone stayed in my hand after I sent the message. Execute at 7:45. No dramatic music, no shaking hands, just a timestamp. At 7:45, exactly 3 dots appeared on my screen. Executing now. I set the phone down and didn't pick it back up. Across town, the ballroom would have just transitioned from speeches to dessert service. Plates sliding onto tables, silverware clinking, conversations loosening now that formal remarks were done. My father always timed his events tightly. Welcome at 7:30. Key remarks at 7:35. Applause by 7:40. Dessert at 7:42. Predictable. That predictability is what made business work, and what made disruption land. At 7:47, Ethan's name flashed on my screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "It's done," he said. "Walk me through it." I called Robert directly, identified myself as Redstone's majority stakeholder representative. Informed him formal notice was delivered to his counsel and the lending bank. Strategic redeployment of $47 million effective end of business day. His tone was steady, professional. Reaction, silence. Then he asked if there was a mistake. There wasn't. Number 1, I clarified the ownership disclosure attached to the notice. Your name is in the controlling interest section. Of course it was. Anyone else here? He stepped away from the table to take the call. But I suspect it won't stay private long. I pictured it clearly. My father halfway through dessert, phone vibrating against white tablecloth. Excusing himself. Walking toward the lobby or hallway outside the ballroom. Victoria watching him confused but smiling to cover it. What did he say when you mentioned my name? I asked. Nothing at first, Ethan replied. Then he asked how long the ownership change had been in effect. 6 months. I told him that. I leaned back in my chair. Did he argue? He tried to reference their relationship with Redstone. I reiterated that majority stakeholders have the authority to reallocate capital under Clause 8.4. Clause 8.4. I'd read it enough times to memorize it. Good, I said. He asked if this was personal, and I told him it was a strategic capital decision. That was the truth. Strategy doesn't scream. It reallocates. We ended the call. I stared at the blank screen of my phone for a few seconds, then locked it and set it face down. 10 minutes passed before it buzzed again. Victoria. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. What did you do? She demanded. No greeting this time. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Redstone just pulled their funding. Correct. She stopped recalibrating. You control Redstone. Yes. Silence. The kind of silence that's not empty but overloaded. For how long? She asked finally. 6 months. You never told us. You never asked. Her breath came sharp through the line. This is Dad's biggest deal. I'm aware. Do you have any idea what this looks like? Yes. What is wrong with you? She snapped. The question almost made me laugh. Nothing is wrong with me, I said evenly. You asked me not to show up. I didn't. That's not the same thing. It is actually. She lowered her voice, probably stepping farther away from the ballroom. Investors are asking questions. The bank rep just left the table. Redstone exercised a contractual right. That's standard business. You're destroying this deal. No, I'm withdrawing capital. There's a difference. She didn't respond immediately. This is about the gala, she asked. It's about respect. She let out a short, humorless laugh. Respect, this is business. So is capital allocation. Her tone shifted from anger to calculation. What do you want? She asked. The question hung there. I didn't hesitate. Nothing. That answer unsettled her more than any demand would have. You don't do something like this for nothing. I do when I'm finished pretending. Pretending what? That I'm irrelevant. There was noise in the background now. Doors opening. Muffled voices. Dad needs to talk to you, she said. I'm sure he does. You can't just pull out of a deal because you feel slighted. I didn't pull out because I feel slighted. Then why? Because I don't invest where I'm not respected. The line went quiet again. You're overreacting, she said finally. No, I replied. I've been patient. She disconnected without saying goodbye. I stood up and walked to the sink, rinsed out the water glass I'd been holding and placed it in the drying rack. Across town, I could imagine the shift inside the ballroom. Redstone's representatives checking their phones. Lenders stepping outside to call credit committee. Victoria attempting to smooth it over with phrases like temporary review and procedural clarification. My father reading the notice document carefully. Scanning to the ownership disclosure section. Savannah Cole, Lieutenant Colonel, majority stakeholder, optics. At 8:03, my phone rang again. Dad. I let it ring once before answering. Savannah, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was tight. Dad, what is this? It's formal notice. You control Redstone. Yes. For how long? 6 months. Another pause. Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It isn't. He exhaled slowly. Do you understand what this does to the project? Yes. The bank is freezing the bridge loan pending review. The secondary fund is asking if we have alternative anchor capital. That's their job. And yours? My job is to allocate capital responsibly. He went quiet for several seconds. I thought you said you were consulting, he said. I do more than that. I can see that. The room behind him sounded different now. Lower energy. Conversations no longer bright. This is personal, he said. No, I answered. It's structural. He didn't argue with that. You could have come to me, he said. I did, I replied. For years. Silence again. I need to go, he said finally. I understand. The call ended without resolution. I stood in my kitchen alone and checked the time. 8:12 p.m. 40 guests. Clean optics. And a capital stack that no longer looked as polished as it had an hour earlier. I left the dishes in the rack and walked back to the table when the phone vibrated again. Ethan, secondary lender just requested clarification on capital continuity, he said. They're asking Redstone's managing partners whether this is temporary or strategic. It's strategic, I said. I know. I told them majority stakeholder reallocation. That language tends to land. It should. Your father looks like he's still inside the ballroom, Ethan added. Redstone's rep stepped out. Bank officer is on the patio. He wasn't guessing. In deals like this, information travels fast. Lawyers text. Lenders text. Partners step aside. They're trying to stabilize perception, he said. If they can present this as a brief review, the room calms down. It isn't a review. No. We both understood the difference between a pause and a withdrawal. Counsel confirmed the notice hit their attorney's inbox at 7:46. Ethan continued. Time-stamped. Clean. Good. He hesitated. For what it's worth, this was precise. I don't do sloppy. He gave a short breath of agreement and ended the call. I picked up my laptop and logged into our internal dashboard. Nothing urgent. Ohio expansion stable. Texas municipality and onboarding. No fires to put out. Discipline doesn't disappear because family drama spikes. At 8:19, Victoria called again. This time I answered on the first ring. They're asking if this is retaliation, she said immediately. Retaliation for what? For tonight. It isn't. It feels like it, because the timing makes it visible, I said. Not because it's emotional. You could have waited. I could have. Why didn't you? Because timing is part of business. She didn't respond right away. You embarrassed Dad, she said finally. No, I replied. Capital embarrassed Dad. That's semantics. No, it's structure. Her breathing was uneven now. I could imagine her pacing near the bar, keeping her voice low while guests pretended not to listen. Redstone's reps are saying their majority stakeholder decided to rebalance portfolio exposure, she said. They won't say your name publicly. They don't need to. It's going to come out. Yes. And you're fine with that. I've been fine with my name attached to my work for years. You've never even told us how big your company is. You never asked. There it was again. Not anger, just fact. You think this proves something, she said. It clarifies something, which is that I'm not an accessory to your narrative. She let out a tight laugh. You always do this. You make everything about principle. Because it is. It's about control, she shot back. You couldn't control tonight, so you controlled the funding. I considered that. You controlled the guest list, I said. I controlled my capital. Silence. Do you even understand what happens if this deal collapses? She asked. Yes. Jobs. Contractors. The city. Then you should have diversified your anchor exposure. That's not fair. It's not unfair either. Her voice hardened. You did this because I asked you not to come. I did this because I won't invest where I'm treated like a liability. That's dramatic. No, that's selective. In the background, I heard a man's voice ask her something. She muted the call, briefly responded to him, then came back on the line. Dad's stepping back up to address the room, she said. He's telling them Redstone is reviewing internal allocations. That's accurate. You're enjoying this. No. That answer surprised even me with how true it felt. I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't celebrating. I was calm. That makes it worse, she said quietly. She hung up before I could respond. I stood and walked to the window again. The parking lot outside my apartment was still. A few cars under streetlights. Nothing cinematic, just normal. Across town, my father would be attempting to project control. He's good at that. Years of negotiations build that muscle. But control built on assumptions cracks when information changes. At 8:37, Ethan texted instead of calling. Bank froze bridge financing pending updated capital commitments. I typed back expected. He followed with another. Secondary fund requesting emergency call tomorrow morning. Expected again. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. This wasn't chaos. It was sequence. When anchor capital withdraws, lenders reassess. When lenders reassess, secondary investors pause. When secondary investors pause, momentum evaporates. Momentum is what Victoria built the Gala around. Optics. At 8:52, my father called again. I answered. The council rep just left, he said without greeting. I see. You see, I understand how these rooms work. He didn't argue that. This is damaging, he said. Yes. I would have appreciated a conversation. I've tried to have those. That's not the same as pulling $47 million mid-dessert. No, I agreed. It isn't. There was a sound like he rubbed his forehead. Victoria says this is about respect, he said. She's not wrong. You're an army officer, he said. You don't need validation from a gala. I don't need validation, I replied. I need alignment. With what? With reality. And reality is that I'm not an embarrassment to be managed. He didn't respond immediately. I never called you an embarrassment, he said. You didn't have to. The line went quiet again, but not hostile. Just heavy. I need to handle this, he said finally. You do. He ended the call. I looked at the clock on the stove. 9:04 p.m. An hour ago, dessert had been served. Now, the most important thing in that ballroom wasn't the wine pairing or the seating arrangement. It was a capital commitment that no longer existed in the way they had presented it. Victoria had wanted a clean narrative. What she got instead was clarity. At 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Redstone reps just left the ballroom. I pictured it without needing details. Two men in tailored suits stepping outside together. Phones pressed to ears. Voices low but tight. Investors don't leave early unless the math shifts. A minute later, another message. Bank officer departed. Told your father they'll reconvene after internal review. Momentum evaporates quietly. No shouting, just chairs scraping earlier than planned. I set the phone down and walked to the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of water, and took a slow drink. My hands were steady. That's the part people misunderstand. Discipline doesn't turn off just because family is involved. At 9:26, Victoria called again. Her voice was no longer sharp. It was controlled. You need to understand what this looks like, she said. I do. Redstone's managing partners just confirmed you're majority stakeholder. Dad didn't know. I know. They're asking why he didn't disclose the ownership shift. Because he didn't know. That makes him look incompetent. That's not my narrative. It's the room's narrative. I leaned against the counter. Rooms shift fast. You think this is clever, she said. No, I think it's accurate. There was movement behind her. Doors opening. Music fading. The energy of a room winding down earlier than scheduled. Half the guests are leaving, she said quietly. Before coffee. Coffee is the polite exit point. Leaving before that sends a message. What are the Redstone reps saying now, I asked. They're sticking to portfolio rebalancing language, but they're distancing themselves. They should. You built this position without telling us, she said. You let us present Redstone as stable capital. You presented Redstone as stable capital. I never presented anything. That's semantics again. No, it's responsibility. She exhaled sharply. You've put Dad in a position where he has to explain to every lender why his daughter pulled funding. He has to explain why his capital stack wasn't diversified. You sound like a consultant. I am one. She went quiet for a moment. When did this become about proving a point, she asked. It became about alignment, I said. With what? With the reality that I'm not something to manage. You weren't being managed, she said quickly. You texted me not to post in uniform. That's branding. You told me I didn't belong in the room. Because it's a private equity event. And I own the private equity. Silence. That landed harder than anything else. You did this because I've always outperformed you, she said suddenly. It surprised me she said it out loud. No, I answered. You said that. I never. You've been reframing me since we were teenagers. That's ridiculous. Is it? She didn't respond. I heard a door close in the background. The noise level dropped. Dad's coming home, she said finally. He's done. The gala was scheduled until 10. He shouldn't drive angry, I said. He's not angry, she replied. He's embarrassed. There it was, embarrassed. By capital, by structure, by exposure. He'll call you again, she said. I expect that. She hesitated. Did you ever plan to tell us, she asked. Yes. When? When someone asked what I actually do. The line went silent for a long second. Then she hung up. I walked back to the table and opened my laptop again. Not to monitor chaos, to review our quarterly forecast. Our company was onboarding a new city client next month. That mattered more than the gala. At 9:58, Ethan called. Update, he said. Redstone's board just scheduled an emergency call for tomorrow morning. Your father's firm requested reconsideration. And majority stakeholders rarely reconsider mid-event. I won't. I didn't think you would. He paused. For what it's worth, the execution was textbook. I'm not grading it, I said. No, but it was precise. Precision matters more than drama. What's your read on reputational fallout? I asked. Short-term, your father's firm takes a hit. Long-term, if they restructure properly, they survive. Redstone's fine. The market doesn't punish funds for reallocating capital. It punishes opacity. Opacity. That word would linger in rooms long after tonight. At 10:12, my father called again. This time his voice was tired. They're gone, he said. I assumed. Redstone's representatives left before we cut the cake. He laughed once without humor. I've never had guests leave before cake. There's a first time for everything. You're not sorry. I'm not reckless. That's not what I asked. He sounded older in that moment. I'm not sorry for exercising a contractual right, I said. I am sorry it happened this way. It didn't have to. It did. He didn't argue. Victoria says you feel disrespected, he said. That's accurate. I've never disrespected you. You've minimized me. That's different. It isn't. He was quiet for several seconds. I genuinely didn't know, he said. That's the problem. He exhaled slowly. The board's asking why we didn't disclose Redstone's ownership shift. Because you didn't review it closely. You think I'm careless? I think you trusted the optics. Silence again. I built this company over 25 years, he said. I know. And tonight it felt like it slipped. I didn't take it, I said. I removed myself. That's not how it feels. Feelings don't change balance sheets. He didn't respond immediately. I need to reassess, he said. You should. He ended the call without anger. I closed the laptop and turned off the kitchen light. Across town, the ballroom would already be empty. Staff stacking chairs, clearing glasses, collecting unused place cards. 40 guests had come expecting a celebration. They left with recalculated risk. Victoria wanted a flawless night. What she got instead was a room forced to acknowledge where the leverage actually lived. I woke up at 0500 the next morning without an alarm. Habit. For a few seconds, the apartment was quiet enough that the night almost felt theoretical. Then my phone lit up. 6 missed emails, 3 texts, 1 calendar invite titled, Redstone Emergency Board Review, 8:30 a.m. I sat up, swung my feet onto the floor, and reached for the phone. The first email was from Redstone's managing partner. Capital reallocation acknowledged. Lenders requesting clarification on long-term commitment strategy. Will proceed per majority direction. The language was careful. No emotion. No blame. The second email was from Ethan. Bridge financing officially frozen pending replacement anchor commitment. Secondary fund suspending participation until capital stack stabilizes. I read that twice. Suspending participation. That was the phrase that mattered. It meant the deal wasn't dead yet. It meant the deal was unstable. I showered, dressed, and drove to Fort Meade like it was any other Tuesday. Discipline doesn't skip a day because family tension spikes. At 7:30, I stepped into a secure conference room for our regular operations sync. Cyber incident review. Resource allocation. Deployment planning. All the things that actually affect people's lives. No one in that room knew what happened at a country club ballroom the night before. And it didn't matter. At 0830, I joined the Redstone board call from a private office cleared for unclassified business. The managing partners looked tight on screen. One of them started. We received immediate lender feedback overnight, he said. Cole Development's project is now categorized as high risk due to anchor capital volatility. Volatility. Expected, I replied. We want to confirm your direction, he continued. Is the redeployment final? Yes. He nodded slowly. Then we'll proceed with portfolio adjustments. There were no raised voices, no dramatics, just alignment. After the call, Ethan rang. They're scrambling, he said. Specifically, Cole Development is trying to secure replacement anchor capital. That's not easy in under 24 hours. The bank won't unfreeze without proof. They won't get it quickly, I said. Victoria's been calling every secondary contact in their network. I almost smiled at that image. Her pacing office floors, dialing lenders she'd charmed at holiday events. She underestimated concentration risk, I said. She underestimated you, Ethan corrected. There was a difference. At 10:15, my father emailed. Not a call, not a text. An email. Savannah, we're convening with our board at noon. Lenders are requesting detailed explanations. I need clarity on your long-term position. Is there any scenario where Redstone reinstates capital? Dad. Direct. I read it once, then again. My response was simple. Redstone's decision stands. Future allocations depend on project structure and risk profile. No reinstatement under current terms. No emotion. Just capital language. He replied 15 minutes later. Understood. That word again. Understood can mean acceptance. It can also mean calculation. By midday, word had started to move beyond the ballroom. A regional development blog posted a short piece, Anchor Investor Withdraws from Annapolis Redevelopment Project. No names beyond Redstone and coal development. But anyone in that ecosystem could connect dots. At 1300, Victoria called. Her voice was different this time. Not sharp, not angry. Tight. They're asking if I knew about the ownership change, she said. Did you? No. Then answer honestly. They think I should have. That's their opinion. I'm CFO, she said. I sign off on capital relationships. Yes. They're saying due diligence should have flagged majority stakeholder shifts. That's a fair question. You're enjoying this, she said. No. Then why are you so calm? Because this isn't chaos. It's consequence. She didn't respond immediately. The board wants to bring in external advisors, she said finally. They're questioning risk oversight. That's standard. For a mid-project capital withdrawal. Yes. Silence. They're discussing reassigning certain responsibilities, she added. There it was. Optics cut both ways. I didn't ask for that, I said. You triggered it. No, I corrected. Structure triggered it. You keep hiding behind that word. I'm not hiding. She let out a slow breath. Dad hasn't said much, she said. What do you expect him to say? I don't know. He's recalculating. I've never seen him blindsided like that. He wasn't blindsided, I said. He just didn't look. She didn't argue that. Do you realize how long I worked on that deal? She asked. Yes. Months of modeling, negotiation, relationship building. I know. And one call wiped momentum. Momentum built on one anchor is fragile. You always talk like a briefing slide. It keeps things clear. There was noise behind her. Office sounds. Papers moving. They're asking me to step back from lender communications temporarily, she said quietly. That landed heavier than the Gala. I didn't request that, I said again. I know. For a second, the old version of her surfaced. Not the polished CFO. Just my older sister. You've always had it easier, she said. That stopped me. Explain. You're the smart one. The disciplined one. The one teachers liked. The army liked. Investors apparently like. That's not easy, I said. You never had to fight to be seen. I almost laughed at that. I spent years being unseen, I replied. You chose that. No, I said evenly. You chose to ignore it. She went quiet. I have to go, she said after a moment. The line clicked off. At 1600, Ethan sent a final update for the day. Secondary fund formally withdrew participation pending new anchor commitment. Coal development now seeking alternative capital sources. Timeline extended indefinitely. Indefinitely. That's how deals fade. Not with explosions. With extended timelines. I shut down my computer at 1700 and drove home through light traffic. The sky was flat gray. Normal. No reporters outside my building. No dramatic fallout. Just market response. At 1830, my father texted. Board recommends restructuring development scope. Scaling back phase 1. Evaluating asset sale options. I read it twice. That wasn't collapse. That was contraction. Capital doesn't disappear. It reallocates. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and stared at the quiet room. Victoria had wanted a flawless narrative. Instead, she now had to explain risk oversight to a board that valued precision over polish. And for the first time in a long time, no one in that company could pretend I wasn't part of the equation. I was halfway through a procurement review when my assistant knocked and stepped inside. Ma'am, there's a Robert Cole here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. For a second, I thought I misheard her. Did he give a reason, I asked. He said he's your father. I checked the time. 14:07. Has he cleared the visitor desk? Yes, ma'am. He's waiting in the lobby. I closed the file on my desk. Send him in. I didn't rush. I straightened the stack of papers in front of me, capped my pen, and stood up. The office wasn't dramatic. Standard army furniture, metal desk, flag in the corner, 2 chairs across from mine. No polished wood, no glass walls, no catered dessert. The door opened a minute later. My father stepped in wearing a navy overcoat tie slightly loosened, the kind of look men wear when they haven't slept well. He paused just inside the doorway, as if recalibrating to the space. You work here every day, he said quietly. Yes. He looked around again. No marble, no chandelier, no investor wall, just mission boards and a whiteboard with deployment schedules. He took the chair across from my desk without being asked. I've never been on base, he said. I know. He rested his hands on his knees. I should have come sooner. To Fort Meade, to your world. There wasn't sarcasm in his voice. Why are you here, I asked. He exhaled slowly. The board met this morning, he said. They're restructuring the development. Scaling phase 1 down by nearly 40%. I nodded once. Victoria's been reassigned from direct lender communication, he added. Temporarily. Understood. That word again, he said faintly. It works. He studied me for a long moment. You've been doing this for how long, he asked. The Army, the company, 3 years, and Redstone, 6 months. He leaned back slightly. You built a company that generates 40+ million a year, he said. You acquired majority control of a private equity fund. And I found out during dessert. Yes. Why? Because you never asked. He absorbed that. I thought you were consulting, he said. You assumed. You let us assume. I answered the questions you asked. He shook his head slightly. That feels like a technicality. It's not. He went quiet. I thought you chose the Army because it was structured, he said. Predictable. It is structured, I replied. But not predictable. I thought you avoided business because you didn't want to compete. I compete every day, I said. Just not in ballrooms. His mouth tightened. Victoria said you've always believed she diminished you. I don't believe it, I said. She did. That's strong. It's accurate. He rubbed his hands together slowly. She's always felt compared to you, he said. She compared herself. You were the academic one. The disciplined one. She reframed that as rigid. He didn't deny it. I didn't realize how far you'd gone, he said. That's the point. He looked at the mission board behind me. Names, rotations, timelines. This is serious work, he said quietly. Yes, and you run a company on top of it. I oversee it. He nodded once. When Redstone signed onto our project, he continued, you could have told me. Yes. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to see if respect would show up without leverage. And it didn't. No. He let out a long breath. I asked you not to come to the gala, he said. You did. That wasn't about embarrassment. It was about optics. Yes. And optics implied I was a liability. I didn't mean it that way. But you meant it. He didn't argue. I've spent 25 years building coal development, he said. I've protected its reputation carefully. And I've spent 16 years building mine. He nodded slowly. When Victoria said uniform didn't fit the room, I didn't push back, he admitted. I know. I thought it was practical. It was convenient. There was no anger in my voice, just fact. He leaned forward slightly. Was there any version of this where you didn't pull the funding, he asked. Yes. What would that have required? A conversation, I said. A real one. About what? About what I actually do. About acknowledging that I'm not a side note. He looked down at his hands. I underestimated you, he said. Yes. I minimized what you built. Yes. I trusted Victoria's framing too often. Yes. He nodded slowly with each answer as if checking boxes he should have checked years ago. I don't know how to fix this, he said. It's not about fixing, I replied. It's about seeing clearly. He glanced up. You didn't destroy the project, he said. No. You destabilized it. I removed my capital. He let that settle. Are you planning to reinstate under different terms, he asked. No. The answer came easily. He absorbed that without visible surprise. I can't force you, he said. No. But I can ask, he added. Is there anything you want from me? That question would have meant something different a week ago. Recognition, I said. Not applause. Not a gala seat. Just acknowledgement that I'm not something to manage. He nodded once. I see you, he said quietly. I held his gaze for a moment. That's a start, I replied. He stood slowly and looked around the office again. You built something substantial, he said. So did you. He gave a faint smile at that. I'll have to decide what coal development looks like now, he said. Yes. And Victoria will have to decide who she is without controlling optics. That's hers. He walked to the door, then paused. I'm proud of you, he said. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't loud, just direct. Thank you, I answered. He nodded and stepped out into the hallway, escorted back toward the visitor desk, and whatever conversations waited outside the gate. I sat down again and reopened the procurement review on my desk. Network integrity didn't shift because family dynamics did. But something fundamental had moved. Not in the ballroom, not in the capital stack. In the way my father had finally walked into my world instead of asking me to stay out of his. I stayed at my desk for another hour after he left, finishing the procurement review like it was any other afternoon. Routine is stabilizing. It reminds you that no single event defines the entire system. By the time I drove home, the sky was already dark. Traffic steady. Radio low. Nothing cinematic. The fallout from the Gala didn't explode overnight. It tightened. Within a week, Coal Development officially announced a phased restructuring of the Annapolis project. Public language was careful. Revised capital alignment. Adjusted scope. Prudent recalibration. Investors translate that easily. The project wasn't dead. It was smaller, slower, less ambitious. Redstone formally reallocated the $47 million into two diversified redevelopment funds in Ohio and North Carolina. Conservative projects, strong municipal backing, lower risk exposure. No one accused me of misconduct. No regulator called. No ethics review flagged conflict. Everything had been clean. Victoria didn't call for 3 days after coming to Fort Meade. When she finally did, her voice sounded different. They're moving me out of lender negotiations, she said. For now, I asked. They're calling it a restructuring of roles. That's common. It doesn't feel common. I know. She exhaled slowly. They think I should have identified the Redstone ownership shift. That's a fair critique. I trusted the managing partners. You trusted optics, I said gently. She didn't argue this time. Dad won't say it, but I know he's disappointed, she said. In what? In the oversight. That word carried more weight than embarrassment ever had. Are you? She asked. Am I what? Disappointed in me. I considered that. No, I said. I'm clear about you. What does that mean? It means you built your value around controlling perception. And you built yours around what? Structure. She was quiet. I thought if I controlled the room, I'd control the outcome, she admitted. That works until the numbers change. She let out a small breath that might have been a laugh. You always talk like a briefing slide. And you always talk like a press release. That broke something. Not a fight. Just tension. I never hated you, she said. I know. I was scared you'd outgrow us. I already did, I replied evenly. You just didn't look. There was no anger in it, just fact. A month passed. Coal Development formally reduced the scale of Phase 1 by nearly half. Contractors adjusted bids. Zoning approvals stayed intact, but momentum faded. Victoria transitioned into an internal risk oversight role. Less visibility. More spreadsheets. My father stopped posting about expansion on LinkedIn. Instead, he posted about long-term stability and sustainable growth. Language shifted. At Fort Meade, my world didn't change. Promotion board results came through 2 weeks later. I remained on track. My company signed 2 new municipal clients. We crossed $50 million in projected annual revenue. I authorized a cautious expansion into 1 additional state. No splashy announcements. Just execution. One evening, my father called. Can we have dinner, he asked. Where? Your place or mine? No guests. Just us. Yes, I agreed. He came over the following Saturday. No suits, no presentation. Just a simple jacket and a bottle of wine. We sat at my kitchen table. He asked questions this time. Real ones. How many employees now? 127. How do you manage oversight with active duty? Board structure. Clear delegation. What's your long-term plan? Build resilient infrastructure systems that mid-sized cities can actually afford. He nodded. I never understood cyber, he admitted. You never tried. That's fair. There was no defensiveness in his tone. Victoria feels exposed, he said. She should. That's blunt. It's accurate. He leaned back in his chair. I built my company on relationships, he said. Trust. Reputation. And you protected those by controlling optics. Yes. But you didn't apply the same scrutiny to internal assumptions. He didn't argue. I assumed you were fine, he said. Stable, content. I was, but I didn't ask what you were building. No, that's on me. He said it simply, not dramatically, not performative. Ownership without theater. Why didn't you just tell us, he asked. Because I didn't want to compete for belief. He considered that. I believe you now, he said. That's good. We ate quietly for a moment. This wasn't revenge, was it? He asked. No. It felt like it. I withdrew capital, I said. I didn't sabotage the project. You knew it would hurt. Yes. You did it anyway. Yes. Why? Because I won't invest where I'm treated as a liability. He nodded slowly. That's consistent, he said. It is. After dinner, he stood in the kitchen for a moment longer than necessary. You've built something substantial, he said again. So have you. He smiled faintly. I think I'm going to step back over the next year, he said. Sell partial interest. Let the firm evolve. That makes sense. Victoria will have to decide what she wants separate from me. She should. He looked at me carefully. You don't owe us anything, he said. I know. That's new for me. For both of us. He left shortly after. I cleaned the plates, turned off the lights, and stood for a minute in the quiet apartment. There was no trophy, no applause, no dramatic reconciliation, just clarity. Victoria had wanted a flawless gala. I had wanted acknowledgement. She got a disrupted evening. I got alignment. Capital moved. Projects shrank. Roles shifted. And for the first time, I wasn't the sister who needed to stay home for the sake of optics. I was the one who decided where the capital and the respect went. I didn't walk away from that gala with a sense of victory. I walked away with clarity. Family drama doesn't explode because of one night. It builds over years of assumptions, comparisons, and quiet dismissals. What happened wasn't about humiliating my sister or tearing down my father's business. It was about boundaries. In family revenge stories, people expect shouting betrayal and dramatic payback. Real life is different. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to fund a narrative that minimizes you. Sometimes power is quiet. And sometimes the most disruptive thing you can do in a room full of optics is remove your capital and let the numbers speak. If this family revenge story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, sidelined, or told you didn't belong, make sure you subscribe. This channel is about real-world family drama, strategic reversals, and the kind of revenge stories that don't rely on chaos, just clarity. Subscribe and stay with us for more stories, where respect, structure, and strength shift the balance.